Source code: My Beginnings by Bill Gates, summarized by Detailed Book Summaries. Click on the subscribe button. Let us know in the comment the book you would love us to summarize for you. Chapter 1: Roots in Seattle, Family, Curiosity, and Early Years. Bill Gates begins with his childhood in Seattle, growing up in a household that blended warm support with high expectations. His family played a central role. His grandmother, a sharp card player who taught him early lessons in probability and decision-making. His parents, demanding but caring, who pushed him academically and socially. Despite their encouragement, Gates often felt like an outsider. He describes himself as bright but rebellious, chafing against structure, quick to argue, traits that made childhood both invigorating and lonely. As a boy, Gates's mind was restless and analytical. He was drawn to puzzles, mathematics, and systems, an inclination his parents nurtured by giving him access to books, challenges, and opportunities to explore. Yet emotionally, he sometimes struggled. He felt isolated from peers, and in adolescence, he butted heads frequently, especially with his mother, whose sense of order clashed with his intensity. This tension, he later reflects, forged something essential, both a confidence in his intellect and a hunger to belong. His world shifted dramatically when his school, Lakeside, acquired a computer terminal. At around age 13, he typed his first programs in BASIC, a simple but powerful introduction to logical structure and command. The machine demanded precision, a way of thinking that suited him deeply. He wrote a tic-tac-toe game, followed by a rudimentary lunar lander simulation, discovering that every minor error unraveled the entire system. That unforgiving logic galvanized his respect for computing. It was rigid, exacting, yet deeply rewarding when things worked. In parallel to his growing fascination with computers, Gates cultivated close friendships. One particularly deep bond was with Kent Evans, a fellow student at Lakeside who shared his intellectual fervor. Kent was more than a friend. He was a sounding board, a collaborator, and someone who challenged Gates in ways few others could. Their relationship would leave a lasting mark on Gates's life. Chapter 2: Teachers, Mentors, and the Formation of His Thinking. Gates's early mentors played a profound role in shaping his character and ambition. At Lakeside, his teacher Fred Wright embodied an unconventional teaching philosophy. Rather than impose rigid structure, he encouraged students to experiment, explore, and learn by doing. Gates remembers Wright allowing freedom in the computer room, trusting students to guide themselves, a rare gift of autonomy that empowered him and his peers to push boundaries. Then there was Dr. Daniel Morris, his high school chemistry teacher, a man with a PhD and real-world lab experience. Morris challenged Gates not just to memorize facts, but to understand science at a deeper level. He dragged his students into the lab, demanding they not just repeat experiments, but truly engage with the why behind each reaction. Gates credits Dr. Morris for nurturing his scientific curiosity. Even when his grades were uneven, that rigorous exposure to experimentation steered him toward analytical thinking. Away from the lab, his grandmother's love of card games, probability, strategy, tactical thinking, subtly informed how Gates thought about risk, decision-making, and long-term planning. She never framed it in technical terms, but by shuffling decks and calculating odds, she introduced him to a kind of computational thinking rooted in everyday life. Despite his intellectual gifts, social challenges persisted. Gates acknowledges in the memoir that he was sometimes abrasive, socially tone-deaf, or hyper-focused. He even reflects, with hindsight, on traits aligning with what we might now label neurodivergent. His monomaniacal focus, his bluntness, his difficulty reading social cues. But he doesn't frame these as excuses. Instead, he sees them as part of the source code that made him who he is. Chapter 3: Loss, Grief, and the Weight of Friendship. One of the most poignant parts of Gates's early life was the sudden death of his best friend, Kent Evans. Kent died in a mountaineering accident, and the shock hit Gates hard. He writes candidly about the grief, not only his own, but also the overwhelming pain of Kent's family, especially his mother. Gates realized that while he felt deep loss, he could never fully understand her heartbreak, and that humbles him even decades later. That tragedy became more than personal sorrow, it became a turning point. Gates reflects on what might have been. If Kent had lived, perhaps he would have joined Microsoft. He wonders how their partnership could have changed the course of his life and Microsoft's. The loss also solidified something in him, a commitment to thinking long-term, to creating something that lasted beyond fleeting moments, and to honor the memory of someone who believed in him. At the same time, Gates's emotional maturity deepened. He began to see how much he leaned on logic, structure, and his inner world to cope with turmoil. His early friendships, the loss, the reflection, they all shaped not just his mind, but his values. He realized, in a way, that personal tragedies become part of one's internal operating system. Chapter 4: Harvard, Ambition, and the Dawn of Microsoft. After high school, Gates went to Harvard, but his true passion didn't lie in traditional academia. At Harvard, he studied computer science and mathematics, but what consumed him more was writing software, thinking about business, and dreaming of a future centered around computing. He was fascinated by the idea that software could be paid for a bold notion at a time when many hobbyists believed software should be free. Together with his childhood friend Paul Allen, Gates pursued that vision. His mind whirred with possibilities, a computer on every desk, software everywhere. When a magazine showed the Altair 8800, a groundbreaking microcomputer kit, Gates and Allen seized the opportunity. They wrote an interpreter for BASIC on a PDP-10 in Harvard's labs, and then made a bold promise to MITS, the company behind the Altair. They could deliver working software for that machine. The work was intense. Gates describes coding day and night in cramped conditions, wrestling with memory limits, bugs, and the sheer pressure of delivering something from scratch. Alan even finished parts of the code mid-flight to Albuquerque, where MITS was located. Their efforts paid off. MITS licensed the software, and their company, Microsoft, was born. The exhilaration of creating something real, something people would use, that was a turning point. Gates argues that in those early days, it wasn't just technical genius that mattered, but belief. Belief in a future where personal computing would spread, and in their ability to shape it. Chapter 5: Reflection, Humility, and the Legacy of Beginnings. In the final section of the memoir, Gates steps back to reflect on his early life with the benefit of hindsight. Approaching his 70s, he revisited old photographs, code printouts, school reports, and memories. He looked not just at his achievements, but at the roots. What in his upbringing, friendships, and losses led him to where he now stands? He speaks frankly about his temperament, his intensity, his occasional insensitivity, his relentless drive, and frames them as elements of his inner operating system, his source code. He does not hide his privilege. He acknowledges the luck of being born into a supportive family at the right time with access to unique opportunities. But more than luck, he sees persistent choice. He chose to follow his curiosity, to take risks, and to build. Yet he's humble too. He credits those who gave him freedom, the teacher who trusted him to learn on his own, the friend who pushed him intellectually, his family who believed in possibility. And he doesn't romanticize everything. He admits mistakes, moments of callousness, and the emotional cost of his obsessive focus. The memoir ends in 1979, with Gates preparing to move Microsoft to Seattle. It's a symbolic return. He goes back to his roots, to the city of his youth, as he launches into a bold new chapter. But his story, he makes clear, is still unfolding. This is just his beginning. Click on the subscribe button. Let us know in the comment the book you would love us to summarize for you.